Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the offering, and we are creeping our way towards games. I almost said real games, but I guess games with a caveat. There's going to be 3 weeks, and hockey players playing games wearing jerseys. So the Prospect Challenge. So declare those games however you want, but we're a couple weeks away from that, which means that we are also a couple weeks away from training camp. So tonight, I'm gonna do a little shift. I'm not gonna talk so much about the team. I'm gonna talk more about the division in which they play in. So this topic comes from the Expected Buffalo Discord, which brought up the division topic earlier this week, and I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and kind of got my wheels spinning, and why we're doing this mini podcast episode we're doing now to kind of go through that. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to try to look at this in the most non-biased way possible. Take the Sabres goggles off and put the neutral observer honest opinion hat up. And of course, I'm wearing a Sabres hat while I do that. But I wanted to go through how I feel about all these teams, where the Sabres shake out in the division, what that means for the playoff possibilities, what that means for the division standings, and then just kind of maybe spin a conversation off of that. So we're going to go team by team here. I put together the key additions, some key removals. Of course, I'm sure as I'm going through this, I'm going to realize I missed a guy or two on the additions and removals, but I did the best that I could as we go through team by team. And then at the end, I'm going to basically put together my rankings, and I have a tier system too that I'll go over as I go through it. But that's what we'll do. We'll go through this team by team. We'll discuss some teams, not a whole lot, but kind of where my head's at, thinking about where the other teams in the Atlantic Division stand. So let's get to it here and waste no time and start with talking about the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. So they had a few guys come off. Brandon Montour, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Ryan Lomberg, Anthony Stolarz, Kevin Stenlund. Nobody of significance. And they really didn't add anybody of significance either. Jesper Boquist, Thomas Nosek, Nate Schmidt, Adam Boquist. Their biggest moves were the ones that were internal, keeping Sam Reinhart, keeping Dmitry Kulikov. They got some in-house things done, keeping that team mostly intact without having to get rid of anybody besides Montour. And I guess Larson and Ekman-Larsson, obviously, are the two biggest pieces that go off this team, but I think they can survive both of those. So I don't really see Florida coming back to earth here in terms of being 1 or 2 in the division. I still think that's what they're going to be. I still think they're going to be a cup contender. And there's really not a lot to say about that. Maybe there's a Stanley Cup hangover and they start slow. You never know, but the crux of that team is still there. They're not that old. They can all still play. So they're going to be a team that sits at the top of division, and that's Florida. I don't think we need to get too much deeper into them. So moving to the Toronto Maple Leafs here. Toronto. So they're an interesting team this year for me. Obviously, from being in Buffalo, we want to see Toronto not do that well. But I gotta admit, I like some of the moves that they made. I think Chris Tanev was a great addition. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, you see there, as we just talked about, leaving Florida, went to Toronto. Anthony Stolarz, I think, is a great addition, which we'll talk about that in a second. And then you get to Tyler Bertuzzi, TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, and Ilya Samsonov as the 4 players who key, removals from the roster. It should be mentioned that they have a new head coach in Craig Berube. I think that'll make them a more, a more disciplined team, potentially a more defensively disciplined team. And I think Chris Tanev is a big addition. I know he's a little bit up there in age, but I think that'll help. I think Ekman-Larsson still has a little bit of game left too. And then you still have your main piece. You still have your Marner, you still have your Nylander and Tavares and new captain Austin Matthews. So they have all of those guys there still. The big question mark, I think, for them is going to be what they're going to get out of their goaltending with Wool. Is he going to be somebody who can handle the full boat as a number one goaltender? Well, I said, I like Anthony Stolarz. I think you can argue he's one of the best backup goaltenders in the league. He's a backup goaltender. So is he able to step in there if Wool isn't ready or if Wool gets injured? I don't know. I guess that remains to be seen. And really, for me, like, sure, there's still some questions if this team can do it in the playoffs and all of that. Totally get it. Totally understand. But this team, I think, is better than last year. Defensively, their goaltending, we'll see. Their coaching, I think, will help them. So I think Toronto can be somebody who challenges for the division, or they can, just hang out in that 2 spot again. But yeah, I think Toronto is still going to be up there battling with Florida. And the next team potentially battling here, the Boston Bruins. Now, Boston is extremely interesting at this point in the game because as of right now, as of 10:24 p.m. on Thursday, Jonas Korpisalo is a starting goaltender because they do not have a contract done yet with Jeremy Swayman. That probably gets done, but as of now, Korpisalo is their starting goaltender. So additions, Elias Lindholm, completely forgot about that. Max Jones, Korpisalo in the trade. Nikita Zadorov, also forgot they did that. So those are some 4 big additions. Then out the door is Linus Ullmark, who went to Ottawa. We'll get to that in a minute. Danton Heinen, Matt Grzelcyk, and Kevin Shattenkirk, not the biggest of removals, although Heinen had a decent season for Boston last year. So Lindholm... I want to say that I don't think Lindholm is going to make that much of an impact, but then again, it is the Bruins, and they can just plug him in, and he'll be maybe positionally fit as a second or third line center, where in Vancouver, he might have tried to play him a little bit over his head, and that's why there were some struggles there. And even in Calgary, things weren't going great before he was moved to Vancouver. So I think that deal might come back to haunt Boston more than it'll help them, but we'll see. Zadorov, I think is he's your prototypical Boston Bruins defenseman. There's some downside in his game. He's kind of a boomer bust type player, but I think the overall it's going to work for them. But again, I think Boston's going to be right there as long as they get Swayman done, as long as they stay relatively healthy. One of these years, the age is going to catch him for Marchand and Pastrnak and some other guys in that team, but I still think they're right there. I think they're a 2-3 team in this division. As long as they get the goaltending done, and they'll be an annoying team until proven otherwise in this division, unfortunately. The Tampa Bay Lightning. Here is the team where maybe I disagree the most with people. So let's go through their additions. Jake Gensel, Cam Atkinson, Zemgus Girgensons, Jesse Ylonen, Ryan McDonough, JJ Moser. Big players out, though. Steven Stamkos, Tanner Jeannot, Mikhail Sergachev, with Stamkos being the biggest one. Their captain out the door, and that changes the dynamic of that team for sure, and kind of the way that all went down. That cannot be overlooked at all. Now, Jake Gensel, I think, is a bigger addition than maybe people are giving you credit for. I think Ryan McDonough is a nice addition that's going to help on their blue line. I think JJ Moser is underrated. They're getting some guys back this year, like Vasilevsky. Not back, but I think he'll be healthier. Vasilevsky, I know he's 30 years old, but still goaltenders, they age pretty well. So we'll see if he's healthy, off that, I think it was back surgery he had last year. If he can kind of get back to where he was before that, I think that is what we'll probably see happen. Anyways, long story short here, I think there's a lot of people that are predicting Tampa Bay to slide back this year. I am now one of them. I understand they're going to lose Stamkos. Jeannot wasn't that good for him. Sergachev isn't nothing. But also, I think McDonough and Moser maybe outweigh what Sergachev was for them last year. Remember, he only played 30 or so games. In those 30 or so games, he wasn't that great. So I don't know really what they're going to downswing on that one is. That might be a net positive with those two against the performance what Sergachev gave you last year. But they still have their guys. They still have Kucherov. They still have Point. And their other, offensive players, Cirelli, all those guys we talked about maybe getting moved. That didn't. Hagel still there. And they're all under 30 years old. Besides Kucherov, who's 31, I want to say. Um, Hedman is still Hedman. They still have Cernak. So, I mean, they still have a lot of their guys. And I don't want to overpaint like losing Stamkos won't be a big deal for them because I think it plays into it. And I think that Tampa Bay is looking at a downswing. I just don't think we're there yet. I think we're a year or two away from that. Uh, the way I put it in the Discord is a lot of the conversation, I think, from people saying that Tampa Bay is going to slide back. He reminds me of the conversation on the Bruins maybe 2 years ago. And myself and the people that predicted them to come back to earth um, with some of the things that happened. And then when Bergeron retired, like, oh, it's really happening now. And it just didn't. They have their guys, they have their system, they have their coach. Um, and they lost some big pieces. I mean, Bergeron's a huge loss for the Bruins, and they just kept trucking along. So that's kind of like what's to say the Lightning can't do the same thing. So unfortunately for the Sabres' outlooks in terms of being a playoff team, even don't even worry about a top three, but even just a wild card team, I don't think Tampa Bay is going anywhere yet. I still think that they're going to be in the playoff mix. I think they could be a wild card team next year. And I still think we're a year or two away from their downfall. I hope that I'm wrong with that, but I just think there's still too much talent there that hasn't aged out yet. That is going to make them, a pretty good team in the Eastern Conference and somebody that the Sabres are going to have to deal with. Ottawa Senators. Good old Ottawa. Kind of almost like the Sabres North, you can almost say. These two teams have really kind of just been trying to do the same thing for 2 or 3 years now. Unfortunately, I like Ottawa's offseason. So they brought in Michael Amadio, who I think is a good player. Perron, I don't know what he has left. Nick Jensen, I still think has some game. Linus Ullmark, I think will be important for them. We'll see. And then out the door was Chikrin, which I don't know. I don't know if that really ever worked for them. Korpisalo obviously didn't work. Brandstrom and Kubalik was nothing, and Matthew Joseph was okay. They're getting a team back that's healthier this year, some of their bigger players. And then I think they added some big players. But at the end of the day, it all really comes down to Ullmark. I think if Ullmark plays at the level that we saw a lot in Boston, that Ottawa is going to be better than some people expect, as long as they stay healthy. Now, they're like the Sabres where they don't have a ton of depth behind them, and a few key injuries, and they're in trouble. But if they can stay relatively healthy, I think this has the potential to be a low 90s point team in the wild card race in the East, as long as Ullmark comes through for them. But again, outside of Boston, outside of that system, maybe seeing more quality opportunities against, how is Ullmark going to fare in that? It's a contract year for him too. I mean, that's something that he's playing for the next contract. So what does he look like in that situation? How's he going to play into that? How's he going to play into the pressure of being a number one goaltender and have to play 50, 60 games when he really hasn't done that his entire career? When he was signed in Boston, he split with Swayman for the most part. He's never been that number one every single night go-to guy, and he's going to have to be that in Ottawa. So I'm very curious how that goes for them. But I mean, I have to admit, I think Ottawa did a good job this summer. They made some decent moves to put themselves in a position to really compete and try to finally take that next step in not only the division, but in the conference as well. Good old Detroit Red Wings. This, I think, is the opposite of what I said about Ottawa. I don't love a lot of what they did here this offseason. Tarasenko, I don't think there's much left. Mott is whatever. Gustafsson, it's okay. I would have liked that. Wouldn't mind that for the Sabres. Cam Talbot is okay. Sure. And then out the door is Shane Gostisbehere, who was really good for them. Jake Wallman, who had a down year, but I still think as game, they gave him away for nothing. Perron was a nice player for them. Sprong had a good season, and Fabry was kind of an up and down player for them, but had some key key moments for them in their push last year to try to be a playoff team, just falling short of that. I'm not sure this is a better team. And that's not to mention they don't have Raymond done. They don't have Sider done in terms of a new contract. They don't have Jonathan Bergeron done in terms of a new contract. So there's still some work to be done here, but I don't think this is a team that made themselves better. If anything, I think they're the exact same. The goaltending situation is odd to me. Like you're going to take Cam Talbot and I don't know, maybe if Anthony was here, he would say that that Detroit's going to be a playoff team because they have Cam Talbot. Hopefully, he will understand that that's a fun poke for the arguments Anthony and I have had on Talbot. But you're taking a goaltender from the Los Angeles Kings system that most Kings goaltenders do not produce anywhere else besides Los Angeles when they have good years. And Talbot even struggled in LA and eventually ended up losing his job last year. Though he was an all-star for the first half, but he was pretty poor in the second half of the season. And I guess you could say that Alex Lyon is going to be the starter there, and then you still have Ville Husso, but I don't know, man. I think their goaltending is questionable at best. You can make an argument as well, depending how you feel about Luukkonen. You can probably say no, at least the second worst the goaltender group or tandem in this division, depending how you feel about Luukkonen and how you feel about what Montreal has in goal. But I don't know. I think Detroit's in for a step back. I don't really. Again, it's the Yzerman plan that the Yzer plan I never really understood. It just seems like a spinning of wheels, and it kind of reminds me of the Sabres offseason after they just missed the playoffs, where you didn't give much to help, and that might come back and bite them. That's going to be an unfortunate situation. So we'll see how that all plays out for Detroit, but I think they're definitely a team that is looking at a comeback to earth season here. All right. Last but not least here, we have the Montreal Canadiens. So up until last week, didn't really do much of anything. And then eventually they pulled out the Patrick Laine trade. So that's their big move. So there are two moves that I've written down here with Laine and Barré-Boulet. And we don't even know if Barré-Boulet is an NHL player. Jordan Harris goes out the door. Jonathan Kovacevic goes out the door as a defenseman. And that's really it. Montreal kind of hung out, bringing a lot of the same roster back, banking on Slavkovsky and some other guys taking that step, if you will. Some of the younger defensemen, Caden Gooley, they're going to lean on. The goaltending is the same. I don't mind Montembeault, but can he be that number one goaltender for them? I mean, they have Caden Primo too, so maybe that is what they're going to bank on. I don't know. I mean, I think we're safe to say here this is the worst team probably in the division right now. But how I'm gonna word this is I don't think they're that far behind the two that's in front of them. Caulfield to be more healthy this year. Suzuki, I still think is a decent player. We'll see if Kirby Dach has a bounce back year when he's healthy. And like I said, they have some young defenseman. Lane Hutson's going to get some time. I forgot about him. Talking about young defensemen. We're going to see what that looks like. So I think I'd say Montreal is going to be finished last place in the division, but I still think they're going to be a peskier team. I don't say maybe they were last year because I did give the Sabres a hard time, but I still think they're going to be a more improved team than they were last season, just not to the level of, I think, hitting into that next tier. So what that brings us to is my final ranking of the division. So those of you listening on podcasts are not going to be able to see it, but I will kind of go through it here. If I can get this division into 4 tiers. We have, I'll describe it the same way I described it in the Discord, is we have our tier 1, which is your good teams, which I have Florida, Toronto. Tier 2, which is, okay, let me do it again. Tier 1 is your probably good teams, is your good teams for sure. Florida, Toronto. Probably good teams, Boston, Tampa Bay. Then you have tier 3, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, which is if we get a few things to go our way, these 3 or 5 things, we can be a playoff team maybe, could be a wild card. They're all pretty much the same in that group. And then we have tier 4, which is Montreal, at the bottom of the show here. So the official rankings, for those who can't see it, I have Florida number 1, Toronto 2, Boston 3, Tampa Bay 4, Ottawa 5. Some people might not like that, but that's kind of just the way I see it right now. Buffalo 6, Detroit 7, Montreal 8. What this ranking would mean if this is the way things play out, obviously, is Buffalo is most likely, wouldn't be a playoff team if this is how it would finish, because if anything, Tampa Bay and Ottawa would take those last 2 wild cards ahead of them if that's what happened. So it kind of got me thinking, like, let's just say they're on the same page as Ottawa. Those top 3 spots in the division are pretty much set. Like, there's no path to the playoffs there. Florida, Toronto, and either Boston or Tampa are going to take that 3 spot. Those are going to be your 3 teams, those top 4. Fairly confident of that. I don't see 2 of those teams dropping out, like back to the pack, essentially. So your path to making the playoffs through the top of the division, not happening. So then that leaves you to, okay, I got to get a wild card spot. So you're going to have to be better than, at least better than, one of Tampa Bay, Ottawa, and Detroit. Maybe even 2 of them. You're going to be better than. Because if you look at the Metro, I mean, those are some good teams over there. Like, if we quickly look at the Metro division, like, we know that the Rangers are going to be up there in that division. And then it kind of maybe gets questionable. How big of a step is New Jersey going to take to get back into things? I think that they will jump back. Carolina is a team that I could see coming back to earth a little bit. But again, like, that system with Brendan Moore always seems to work, so maybe not. The goaltending, though, is it, it could be a little questionable there. And then you have Pittsburgh, who I don't really think did much to improve themselves. The Islanders, they're always just kind of there, but again, the same thing. They're kind of the same team that they've been. Philadelphia could take another step. Columbus isn't even in the picture. And then there's Washington. So if you say that, let's say New York and Carolina stay in those top 3. And I think the way it currently is right now, I would put the Capitals as the 3rd team. So I would say the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Capitals are your top 3 teams in the Metro Division. I like a lot of what Washington did this offseason. Then that leaves you have to beat out the Islanders, Penguins, Flyers, and Devils. I mean, you can make an argument the Devils are going to be. I mean, really, realistically, okay, let's put it this way. Let's say New York and Carolina are out of range. You got to be better than the Islanders, Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, and Devils. Probably. So then it gets back to, well, if we look at all the teams, Ottawa, Detroit, Islanders, Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, Devils, those 7 teams. Are the Sabres better than all but one of them? That's what they're going to have to be. If that's how they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to be better than all of those teams besides one. And I'm not sure that they are going to be. It's depressing, but when you look at it that way, like, the conference is super competitive. It's a shame that it is. But I don't know, man. It's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult. But I don't know. I think we'll save that full conversation for another episode. But really, I kind of want to go back to focusing the division. Yeah, I don't want to go too much longer. Right? I mean, we're already at 25 minutes. It's pretty long for a short one. But yeah, I mean, that's the way I see it right now. It's an uphill battle, for sure. You're going to need a lot of things to go your way. You need some big years from some players. It's still unfortunate that your playoff path is blocked in the division, and you got to hope for a wild card one. It's tough. It's a tough break. It's a tough world out there, but that's the way it is. So we'll let that marinate. We'll get some feedback from people who listen to this or watch the YouTube videos to see what everybody thinks. So thanks for listening. Enjoy your Thursday night. Enjoy your weekend, your Labor Day long weekend. I guess we could say the official end of summer weekend. How terrible is that? Depressing. But that means that football and hockey are coming. So I guess that's the positive spin on the thing. So thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk again soon. And like I said, everybody stay safe. Have a good weekend. And see ya.